Welcome back, everyone. And today we're going to be talking about Coaching for Character, Chapter 4. The reason that we're going to focus on looking at character education and coaching for character is because it's an essential part to the development of your team and to the development of your athletes. So, in the past, character development has been a primary function of the family, of the school, even religious institutions. But as the family dynamic has shifted, as culture has changed, and people have developed different ideas and different thoughts and different motivations in different areas, it becomes more difficult for one singular area to provide that moral guidance. And so character education and character development has kind of come down to anyone who has an interaction with an athlete, be it a teacher, an administrator, and especially a coach. So, what is character education? Character education is a commitment to educating your athletes about moral behavior so that these behaviors are continuously practiced, corrected when flawed, and celebrated when demonstrated. And it is, in fact, your responsibility. It's part of the job. You can't just expect to go into a practice, conduct that practice, and leave. You are going to have significant impact on that athlete based on your interactions and your actions, the ones that they observe that you may not even think about or notice. So coaches are more than just skill instructors. Once you accept the role of a coach, you are a character educator, and everything you do will influence the character of the people you coach. During your discussion question, I asked everyone about the influential leaders or coaches in your life, and several of you mentioned the character of your coaches without even thinking about it. Some of you referenced all the way back to middle school, so it's quite obvious that those people had a significant impact on your life. Otherwise, you wouldn't have thought to mention them in a class discussion. So that just kind of shows how much impact the character of your leaders or your coaches can have, whether that coach was just a regular sport coach, a dance instructor. A lot of you talked about your parents. You talked about how they influenced you and how they helped you to grow, but you also all referenced their character. And so that's kind of the focus for this chapter. So as we get into that, like I said, coaching is not just about teaching a skill or managing a team. Coaching is about the holistic development of the athlete, and that's why we're getting into character. The coaches that most people admire the most, they don't admire for the skills that they taught them. They admire them for the person that they were or the characteristics that they exhibited during the time that those athletes worked with them. As we get into character and sportsmanship, character is about who we are and what we stand for. Coaches of character know that helping young people to figure out what's right and to instill that desire to do what's right and to guide them in the process of completing the actions to do what's right, not just telling them, but guiding them and showing them. They know that that's essential. And sportsmanship is simply good character while you're participating in sports. So doing what's right, knowing who you are and what you stand for, both as an individual and within your sport. And so it's important that coaches realize how vital it is to basically instill the appropriate values and talk about the appropriate character traits when you're working with your athletes in their sport. Teaching character and sportsmanship is easier said than done. There are a lot of times that we find ourselves caught up in a game or caught up in a contest. And we have to keep in mind that as coaches, we cannot step outside of that character that we want to emulate for our athletes. We cannot find ourselves in a shouting match or a cursing match with the officials or with the other coach or fans or anybody for that matter. You have to maintain a level of calm. You have to be able to exhibit that character as much as possible. And so coaching for character involves 3 steps, and they're similar to the steps for coaching a skill. So when you're coaching a skill, you kind of work through these things. The first thing you're doing is identifying the skill you want to teach. Then once you've identified that skill, you figure out how you're going to teach it. And then once you teach that skill, you give the athlete an opportunity to perform that skill so that you can evaluate their progress to help them to get better. It's the same thing with teaching character and sportsmanship. The first thing you're going to do is identify the principles of character. And the principles of character are the moral values that tell us what we ought to do and that we are to abide by them even when we'd rather not do so. And there are 6 moral values that are advocated by for character educators, and you can find those on page 50 in table 4.1 if you want to review those. The next thing you want to do is teach principles of character. There are 6 strategies involved in teaching these principles that will help you to become a good coach of character. And then finally, you want to provide opportunities to practice that moral behavior, to establish a rule or a routine, and then you want to reward and recognize good character when you see it. This will encourage your athletes to continue this good character trend as they progress through the sport, even though they may not continue to work with you, or they may only work with you for a short period of time. So I want to go a little bit more into teaching the principles of character. You also want to make sure that you provide opportunities for your athletes to practice the moral behavior that you've established with them. So those routines and rituals I talked about before, building that team culture, that's going to give you the opportunity to practice that moral behavior. So when they're put into situations where they're going to have to make character choices, good character choices, you give them the opportunity to do that. That can be something as small as having them to practice respect by shaking hands with the other team. You may have them participate in community service events as a team, and you may encourage them to take responsibility for the facility that you're using to practice, or maybe their equipment, having them to put things away, to keep the locker room clean. Just small things that are going to help them to continue to practice that moral behavior. And then again, when they make mistakes, it's okay. Talk about their mistakes with them, communicate with them. Remember, mistakes shouldn't be something that hinder them, but something they can grow from. So provide them with immediate feedback when possible, and then recognize and reward their progress. Don't just let them do the right thing and it go unacknowledged. And the only time that they see any acknowledgement is if they make a mistake. Use those opportunities to continue to teach that character, to build them up, and to help them to be. And the next section of the chapter talks about bullying and hazing as it relates to character education. There have been a lot of hot topics out there lately, not necessarily with athletics, but just in general about bullying and hazing. So I do want to get into that just a little bit. As a reminder, bullying is an act of aggression by someone or a group, usually a small group, with the intent of harming a person, either physically or psychologically. Bullying usually will exclude someone from a group. You can't sit with us. You are not as cool as we are, those types of things. Whereas hazing is any action or situation created by a group to intentionally produce some type of discomfort or embarrassment to a person that wants to join a particular group. Hazing is usually more of a ritual imposed on someone who wants to join a group, so they're not being intentionally excluded, but they are being intentionally placed in uncomfortable situations. And hazing will commonly involve an entire group or team. Now, one thing that we don't want to happen when we're trying to be character educators is to allow or to overlook or to not necessarily concern ourselves with any types of bullying or hazing. Um, we want to make sure that as coaches that we are aware of what's going on. There is a quote at the end of the chapter on page 58 that says, "Watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become habits. Watch your habits, for they become character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny." And I think that that's a really great thing to hit on. Your character is built out of your experiences and the people who influence your life. So, as influencers of athletes, we have to be very aware of our character and what we allow to slide or what we choose to look over. So, it's not just, I'm not going to bully athletes, I'm not going to yell, I'm not going to make them feel uncomfortable, I won't be hazing anyone. It's not just about you. It also has to be about what you allow to happen on your team and how you allow that team culture to grow and to evolve. And so you want to make sure that you are very aware of what's going on when it comes to bullying and hazing. Um, and then lastly, as you start